Hi. In 1992, I published my first book. It was called A Return to Love, Reflections on the Principles of A Course in Miracles. Sometimes jokingly referred to it as the Cliff Notes of the Course in Miracles. The basic ideas, way simplified. So I'm going to read it to you now. Let's go. Preface. I grew up in a middle-class Jewish family, laced with the magical overtones of an eccentric father. When I was 13 in 1965, he took me to Saigon to show me what war was. The Vietnam War was beginning to rev up, and he wanted me to see bullet holes firsthand. He didn't want the military-industrial complex to eat my brain and convince me that war was okay. My grandfather was very religious, and sometimes I would go to synagogue with him on Saturday mornings. When the Ark was opened during the service, he would bow and begin to cry. I would cry too, but I don't know whether I was crying out of a budding religious fervor or simply because he was. When I went to high school, I took my first philosophy class and decided that God was a crutch that I didn't need. What kind of God would let children starve, I argued, or people get cancer, or the Holocaust happened? The innocent faith of a child met the pseudo-intellectualism of a high school sophomore head-on. I wrote a Dear John letter to God. I was depressed as I wrote it, but it was something I felt I had to do because I was too well-read now to believe in God. During college, a lot of what I learned from professors was definitely extracurricular. I left school to grow vegetables, but I don't remember ever growing any. There are a lot of things from those years I can't remember. Like a lot of people at the time, late 60s, early 70s, I was pretty wild. Every door marked no by conventional standards seemed to hold some key to a lascivious pleasure I simply had to have. Whatever sounded outrageous, I wanted to do, and usually I did. I didn't know what to do with my life, although I remember my parents kept begging me to do something. I went from relationship to relationship, job to job, city to city, looking for some sense of identity or purpose, some feeling that my life had finally kicked in. I knew I had talent, but I didn't know at what. I knew I had intelligence, but I was too frantic to apply it to my own circumstances. I went into therapy several times, but it rarely made an impact. I sank deeper and deeper into my own neurotic patterns, seeking relief in food, drugs, people, or whatever else I could find to distract me from myself. I was always trying to make something happen in my life, but nothing much happened except all the drama I created around things not happening. There was some huge rock of self-loathing sitting in the middle of my stomach during those years, and it got worse with every phase I went through. As my pain deepened, so did my interest in philosophy. Eastern, Western, academic, esoteric, Kierkegaard, the I Ching, existentialism, radical death of God, Christian theology, Buddhism, and more. I always sensed there was some mysterious cosmic order to things, but I could never figure out how it applied to my own life. One day, I was sitting around smoking marijuana with my brother, and he told me that everybody thought I was weird. It's like you have some kind of virus, he said. I remember thinking I was going to shoot out of my body in that moment. I felt like an alien. I had often felt as though life was a private club and everybody had received the password except me. Now was one of those times. I felt other people knew a secret that I didn't know, but I didn't want to ask them about it because I didn't want them to think I didn't know it. By my mid-20s, I was a total mess. I believed other people were dying inside too, just like me, but they couldn't or wouldn't talk about it. I kept thinking there was something very important that no one was discussing. I didn't have the words myself, but I was sure that something was fundamentally off in the world. How could everybody think that this stupid game of making it in the world, which I was actually embarrassed I didn't know how to play, could be all that there is to our being here? So one day in 1977, I saw a set of blue books with gold lettering sitting on someone's coffee table in New York City. I opened to the introduction, and it read, "This is a course in miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. I remember thinking that sounded rather intriguing, if not arrogant. Reading further, however, I noticed Christian terminology throughout the books. This made me nervous. Although I had studied Christian theology in school, I had kept it at an intellectual distance. Now I felt the threat of a more personal significance, so I put the books back on the table. It took another year before I picked them up again, another year, and another year's misery. Then I was ready. This time I was so depressed I didn't even notice the language. This time I knew immediately that the Course had something very important to teach me. It used traditional Christian terms, but in decidedly non-traditional, non-religious ways. I was struck, as most people are, by the profound authority of its voice. It answered questions I had begun to think were unanswerable. It talked about God in brilliant psychological terms, challenging my intelligence and never insulting it. It's a bit of a cliche to say this, but I felt like I had come home. The Course seemed to have a basic message: relax. I was confused to hear this because I had always associated relaxing with resigning. I had been waiting for someone to explain to me how to fight the fight or to fight the fight for me, and now this book suggested that I surrender the fight completely. I was surprised, but I was so relieved. I had long suspected I was not made for worldly combat. For me, this was not just another book. This was my personal teacher, my path out of hell. As I began reading the Course and following its workbook exercises, I could feel almost immediately that the changes it produced inside me were positive. I felt happy. I felt like I was beginning to calm down. I began to understand myself, to get some hook on why my relationships had been so painful and why I could never stay with anything, why I hated my body. Most importantly, I began to have some sense that I could change. Studying the Course unleashed huge amounts of hopeful energy that had been turning darker and darker and more self-destructive within me every day. The Course, a self-study program of spiritual psychotherapy contained in 3 books, claims no monopoly on God. It is a statement of universal spiritual themes. There's only one truth, spoken different ways, and the Course is just one path to it out of many. If it's your path, however, you know it. For me, the Course was a breakthrough experience, intellectually, emotionally, and psychologically. It freed me from a terrible emotional pain. I wanted that awareness of love's presence that I had read about, and over the next 5 years, I studied the Course passionately. As my mother said at the time, I read it like a menu. In 1983, I began sharing my understanding of the Course with a small gathering of people in Los Angeles. The groups began to grow. Since then, my lecture audiences have grown significantly here and abroad. I have had the opportunity to see how relevant this material is to people throughout the world. A Return to Love is based on what I have learned from A Course in Miracles. It is about some of the Course's basic principles as I understand them and relate them to various issues that affect our daily lives. A Return to Love is about the practice of love as a strength and not a weakness, as a daily answer to the problems that confront us. How is love a practical solution? This book is written as a guide to the miraculous application of love as a balm on every wound. Whether our psychic pain is in the area of relationships, health, career, or elsewhere, love is a potent force, the cure, the answer. Americans are not that big on philosophy. We're very big on action, however, once we understand the reason for it. As we begin to understand more deeply why love is such a necessary element in the healing of the world, a shift will occur in how we live our lives within and without. My prayer is that this book might help someone. I have written it with an open heart. I hope you'll read it with an open mind. Every day I'll read a little bit of it. That was the preface. If you want the workbook exercises of the Course in Miracles downloaded into your inbox every day, you can go to Marianne.com and sign up. That's it for tonight. Bye-bye.